From KUNC and the NPR network, this is In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. A few weeks back, we talked about how many Coloradans are planting native plants in their yards, and about how native plants are hardier, use less water, and can support bees and other pollinators in our ecosystem. We also invited you and other listeners to share your questions about native plants. And you sent us loads of responses. So today, we're visiting again with native plant expert Tommy Roth. He's a home horticulture coordinator from Colorado State University Extension, which advises homeowners on landscaping and many other plant-related matters. And he's here to answer some of your questions, starting with one about how sun and shade affects native plants. A listener asked, how do I keep natives in my yard when it is either very shaded by my house, in other words, not dappled sun, or under a pine tree? Can I use water-wise natives in these places?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something a lot of people are often concerned about. So first, let's address the pine tree aspect. So generally, I would try to avoid planting things directly underneath a tree. If you look out in nature, things don't usually grow directly underneath a tree right up to the trunk.
True.
So I'd probably just mulch an area underneath your tree and just kind of leave it like that so that your tree can be as healthy as possible.
Okay.
So for things that are in the shade from your house, there are plenty of native plants that can grow in the shade. A few of them are manzanita, smooth sumac, creeping Oregon grape. There's way more that you'll be able to find online.
Okay, well, let's get to starting these plants out with seeds. One listener wanted to know, what native plants are hard to grow from seed? When should you buy seed versus plugs? And for those who don't know, plugs are just the young plants you might find in a tiny bit of soil at a garden store.
Right. So a lot of natives in our area need something called cold stratification to germinate. So what cold stratification is simply the seed being cold for a certain amount of time. Outside, this happens naturally in the winter. So when it gets warm in the spring, it gets wet and the seed germinates. But if you or a seed company that you're buying from has collected these seeds in the fall and then stored them inside all winter, they're going to have some problems germinating. So make sure your seeds are cold stratified. In terms of where to get seeds and if you should buy seeds versus plugs, there are plenty of seed companies in our area that sell native plant seeds, and they will have germination protocols that they've figured out in their nursery that you can follow. Buying plugs is more expensive because the nursery had to do something for you, but it can save you a lot of time doing that germination, and it can save you some of that troubleshooting and that headache that germinating native seeds might give you. If you want to save time and money isn't an issue, just buy plugs. But if you want to learn a little more about seeds, save some money, maybe grow some more rare plants that might impress a plant nerd, then I would say do seeds.
Tommy, last time we talked, we discussed a bit about what to do with your soil to help native plants thrive. One listener asked, what should I do to my rock-hard clay soil before seeding with natives?
Yeah. There's some things you can do. It really depends on the character of your soil and, if it's seriously rock hard or if it's just rock hard when it's dry. The main problem with having a rock hard soil like this is that the roots are going to have a hard time spreading, and that's going to cause drought stress symptoms in your plant. So one thing you could do is try to amend your soil with some compost. This is going to change the character of the soil. It's going to add in some organic matter. It's going to allow your soil to hold on to nutrients more effectively, hold on to water more effectively. And a lot of native plants aren't super picky with the soil. So as long as the roots can move through the soil, it should be okay. But, it's difficult without seeing the soil to give, super specific advice on what this person should do.
Okay. Well, last time you mentioned how beneficial planting milkweed is to monarch butterflies. And one listener had a follow-up question to that. They said, I'd like to plant milkweed for the butterflies, but read that there are many varieties, and it's important to plant the right type that is native to your local area. And they want to know, which variety should I plant in Loveland?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are super awesome milkweed species that are native to the Front Range. The easiest one to grow and the showiest one, the one that has the most beautiful flowers, the biggest flowers, is called Asclepias speciosa. So you may see milkweed sold under the name Asclepias. Asclepias is the milkweed genus. You'll be able to buy these seeds online. You'll probably be able to get these plugs at a nursery that sells native plants. This is a pretty common native plant that's in the landscape.
Okay.
There are some other native Asclepias species, but they need more specific conditions. And those could be good to try out once you get some experience under your belt growing Asclepias speciosa. And, they call this milk weed. So, Asclepias speciosa, it's an easy plant to grow. It grows literally like a weed. It's an amazing plant.
Well, here's a listener question about deer. This listener asked, as large deer populations roam freely through urban areas, what are your recommendations for deer-resistant species to plant?
Yeah, great question. So one common misconception with deer-resistant plants I want to dispel is that planting them will stop deer from eating all of the plants in your yard. So that's not the case, right? Deer-resistant plants only stop deer from eating themselves. So if you have other plants that deer like to eat in your yard, they'll still eat those even if you plant a deer-resistant plant in your yard.
Okay, so this isn't like putting a deer fence in.
No. So this is just for that specific plant. And so there's a couple of ways that plants can be deer-resistant. So plants that are spiky or thorny, that's pretty obvious. And also plants that taste bad to deer. So spiky and thorny plants, they're obvious. Cacti, yucca, things like a fir or a pine, anything that has, hard or thorny foliage deer don't like to eat that. There's also some other options, so things like currant shrubs, rabbit brush, liatrist. I can't list all of these, but CSU Extension has a list online that you can Google and where you'll find all of this information. And just another side note, if deer are really hungry, all that stuff about them, like thinking plants taste bad, that goes out of the window. They're just trying to survive. So that's why we say deer resistant and not deer proof, basically. Yeah. So, if a deer is really hungry and comes and eats your currant, don't sue me.
Fair enough. All right. Well, I have one last question here. The listener says, I have 3 acres in Greeley and would like to restore it to a natural prairie. Where do I start? Right now, it is full of goat heads, mustard weed, bindweed, and a whole host of others that I can't identify.
That is a super complex question. That's a really tough situation. Having 3 acres is a lot of land that's completely infested with invasive species. So broadly speaking, you'll want to remove those invasive weeds somehow. You could use a herbicide. I don't think you would want to hand pull them, but that's also an option. And then you'll want to replace them with a native prairie seed mix. So these are sold all across the state. And because this is such a complex question, my advice would be to reach out to the Weld County CSU Extension Office to get some specific advice tailored to your unique situation.
Yeah. Well, I've dealt with goat heads before, and I don't wish that on anyone. That's the worst.
Yeah, it's tough. They're not easy to remove.
Tommy Roth is a home horticulture coordinator for the CSU Extension. We'll have a list of native plantings recommended by CSU Extension experts in our show notes and at KUNC.org. And if you have questions about gardening or ideas for stories we should cover, send them to us by emailing noco@kunc.org. That's it today for In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Thanks so much for listening.